Police officers brutally beat a young man, unaware his father is a legendary Delta Force commander. What happens next will shock you. The alley was eerily quiet, the silence broken only by the rough scrape of boots against the cold pavement. A single flickering streetlight cast distorted shadows along the brick walls, its dim glow making the figures hovering over the boy seem even more menacing. The air felt heavy, thick with an unspoken threat, as Isaiah Matthews curled up on the hard asphalt, his body trembling from pain and fear. Then crack! A sharp gasp pierced the night, swiftly followed by the sickening sound of knuckles colliding with flesh. The impact sent shockwaves through Isaiah's ribs, a fresh jolt of agony searing through his body. He clenched his teeth, the coppery taste of blood pooling on his tongue. His heartbeat pounded violently in his ears, muffling the distant hum of traffic and the occasional honk of a passing car. The world around him blurred. Dark figures, flickering lights, the overwhelming pressure of two men towering over him like executioners delivering a final sentence. But to these officers, Isaiah wasn't just a 16-year-old boy. He was something less. Something to be broken. Something to be put in his place. "Thought you were tough, huh?" Detective Greg Holloway sneered, his voice dripping with cruel amusement. His grip tightened around Isaiah's collar, yanking him upward just to slam him back down. The force sent fresh waves of pain shooting through Isaiah's battered frame, but still, he refused to cry out. He wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Officer Brent Carson, the larger of the two, stepped forward, his massive frame blocking out the dim light overhead. He crouched low, his face mere inches from Isaiah's, the pungent stench of beer and stale coffee clinging to his breath. "What, no smart mouth now?" Carson taunted, his thick fingers latching onto Isaiah's jaw, forcing him to look up. "Where's all that attitude?" Isaiah stared back, his silence an act of defiance. And they hated that. Carson's grip tightened painfully before he shoved Isaiah back to the ground. A sharp grunt escaped his lips, but he swallowed the pain, forcing himself to stay quiet. It had all started just minutes ago. Isaiah had been walking home from basketball practice, his gym bag slung over his shoulder, sneakers scuffing the pavement. It was late, too late maybe, but he'd taken this shortcut through the alley dozens of times before. It saved him nearly 15 minutes. He never had a reason to second-guess it. Until tonight. The low rumble of an approaching patrol car sent a ripple of unease through him, but he didn't think much of it, until the vehicle slowed beside him and a sharp voice barked, "Hey! Stop right there!" Isaiah hesitated for only a second before turning to face them. The car's headlights blazed against his face, illuminating the sweat glistening on his forehead. He squinted against the harsh light as two officers stepped out, their expressions unreadable. "Hands out of your pockets," one of them ordered. Confused, Isaiah obeyed, raising his hand slightly. "Is something wrong?" he asked, his voice cautious but steady. Holloway's eyes studied him coldly, calculating. "You match a description." Isaiah's stomach twisted into a knot. He had heard those words before, on the news from friends, whispered at family gatherings in hushed, wary voices. He wanted to ask what description, but deep down he knew it wouldn't matter. His voice alone could be seen as defiance. "I was just heading home," he said, forcing his voice to remain calm, even as unease crept up his spine. Carson stepped forward, his eyes landing on Isaiah's gym bag. "What's in there?" "Basketball stuff. Mind if we take a look?" Isaiah hesitated. He knew his rights. His father had drilled them into him for as long as he could remember. "You don't have to consent to a search," his father always said. "But that doesn't mean they won't do it anyway." Isaiah swallowed hard. "I'd rather not." And that was his mistake. Before he could react, Holloway grabbed his arm. "Got something to hide?" "No." Isaiah pulled back instinctively, panic flashing through him. "I didn't do anything." That was all it took. The shove came fast, slamming him against the brick wall. Then boom! A fist drove into his stomach, knocking the air from his lungs. Isaiah doubled over, gasping for breath. Another strike, his ribs. Then his jaw. A sharp crack. As his head hit the bricks, the world spun violently. He barely had time to process what was happening before he was on the ground, arms raised in a futile attempt to shield himself. But the blows kept coming. Hard. Relentless. Laced with venom and a sick, twisted joy. Pain exploded across his face as his lips split, warmth trickling down his chin. The sharp tang of iron filled his mouth. Isaiah wanted to fight back. He wanted to shove them away, to make them stop. But he knew better. He knew how these stories ended. "Think you can mouth off to us?" Holloway spat, gripping Isaiah's shirt and slamming him against the wall again. The impact sent fresh agony racing through his body. The world pulsed with white-hot pain. His vision swimming. "Don't give them the satisfaction." His father's voice echoed in his mind. "Tantal. Even when they try to break you." Isaiah had never been in a fight before. He had never thrown a punch. His father always said that true strength wasn't in violence. It was in control. It was in knowing when to stand your ground and when to walk away. But there was no walking away from this. Nothing to say now. Carson mocked, landing another brutal punch, this time to Isaiah's ribs. A fresh wave of agony crashed over him, making his vision blur. Darkness threatened to swallow him whole. But he refused to pass out. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. The officers froze. A second of hesitation. Then, just as quickly as the attack had started, it stopped. Holloway and Carson exchanged a glance. They had done enough. They had made their point. Without another word, they turned and walked away, leaving Isaiah crumpled on the ground, his body battered, his breath shallow. His father was a ghost in the military, but when cops beat his son, they made their worst mistake. His pride bled onto the pavement, mixing with the sweat and blood already staining the cold ground. Isaiah listened, his ears ringing, his heartbeat thudding unevenly against his bruised ribs. The retreating footsteps of the officers faded into the night, followed by the sharp slam of car doors. Then, the low, guttural growl of an engine roaring to life. Within seconds they were gone, as if they had never been there at all. But Isaiah knew better. The silence that followed pressed against him like a weight, thick and suffocating. He winced as he took a slow, shallow breath, feeling the sharp sting in his ribs with every movement. The taste of iron lingered on his tongue, his split lip throbbing in protest. His fingers trembled as he reached into his pocket, every joint screaming in pain. He fumbled for his phone, barely able to grasp it with shaking hands. The screen flickered to life. Familiar name on speed dial. He hesitated for only a second. Then, with a deep, pained breath, he pressed down. One ring. Then another. And then finally a voice, deep, steady, and unwavering. The kind of voice that didn't ask questions. The kind that already knew. "Dad." Was. Then calm, precise. "Where are you?" Isaiah tried to speak, but his throat clenched. He swallowed, forcing the words out despite the raw tightness that burned with every syllable. They hurt me." Another pause. This time longer. Then a sound in the background. Something breaking. The sharp, unmistakable shatter of glass meeting an unrelenting grip. A crack, a snap, wood splintering as if something had been crushed by a hand strong enough to destroy it in one motion.